What if everything you've ever been told about the Great Pyramid of Giza is wrong? Not just a little wrong, but fundamentally, mathematically impossible. What if I told you it wasn't built 4,500 years ago, but far, far more recently? Now, I know that sounds crazy, but just stick with me. We're not going to use wild speculation. We're going to use the official numbers, basic math, and cold, hard logic to put the story you learned in school to the test. And you're about to see how, when you actually crunch the numbers, the whole official narrative just completely falls apart. Okay, let's get into it.
So first, let's just recap the official story, the one we're all supposed to believe. We're told that around 2560 BC, the pharaoh Khufu decided he wanted the biggest tomb in history. And somehow, a massive workforce of about 100,000 men using, well, what we're told were primitive tools, managed to quarry, move, and perfectly stack 2.3 million stone blocks. And they did all of this in just 20 years. And these aren't pebbles, right? Each block weighs an average of 2.5 tons. Some of the granite beams inside weigh up to 80 tons. It's an incredible story, for sure. But once you stop being amazed and start doing the math, that story starts to look less like history and more like a fairy tale.
And this is where it gets truly unbelievable. Let's do some simple math. You have 2.3 million blocks and 20 years to do it. Okay? That means you have to place 115,000 blocks every single year, which breaks down to 315 blocks per day. Let's say they're working a brutal 10-hour day, every single day. No weekends, no holidays. That means they are quarrying, shaping, transporting, and perfectly setting one 2.5-ton block every 2 minutes. Think about that. Every 2 minutes, a new block locked in place, nonstop, for 20 straight years. I mean, even with today's technology, with our massive cranes and laser guides, that schedule would be considered borderline impossible. So how on earth were they doing it with copper chisels and ropes? The pace alone tells you something is deeply wrong with this picture.
And that incredible pace? That's just the tip of the iceberg. This is where we leave the story behind and we follow the data. We are about to do a full mathematical takedown of the official narrative. We're going to use simple logic, conservative models, and just see if the story holds up under scrutiny. So let's set aside everything we think we know and just let the numbers speak for themselves.
Our whole investigation is going to start right here with one solid, undeniable fact: the population of Egypt today. It's about 105 million people. This is our anchor to reality. It's a real number we can trust. And from this single data point, we can start to travel backwards in time. This number right here is the key that's going to unlock this whole mystery. So remember it.
All right, let's try a little experiment. We're going to use a super simple, very conservative model to work backwards from our 105 million. Now, obviously, real population growth is messy. There are wars, plagues, all sorts of things, but this will give us a rough idea. Go back 500 years to 1525, and our model suggests a population of about 3.25 million. Funnily enough, that's what historians already claim ancient Egypt had 4,500 years ago. But let's keep going. By 525 AD, we're at 200,000. By 475 BC, just 12,500. You see where this is going, right? If we follow that same simple logic all the way back to 2560 BC, the number we land on is just staggering.
48? According to this basic logical projection, the entire population of the region would have been 48 people. Let that sink in. Not a civilization, not an empire, just a few families. Now look, I know this is a simplified model, but the point is to show you how insane the official timeline is. How do you get from a tiny group of people to the 3 million they claim were there to build the pyramid? The numbers just don't connect. It doesn't add up.
But you know what? Let's be generous. Let's forget our model and just grant them the official estimate of a 3 million strong population. Okay, the story says 100,000 workers built the pyramid. But for any massive project, you need at least 5 to 7 people in support roles for every single worker on the front line. You need farmers, cooks, toolmakers, scribes, the whole system. That means the pyramid project would have actually needed somewhere between 600,000 and 800,000 people. Out of 3 million, that's almost a third of your entire population. Men, women, and children tied up in one building project for 20 years. Who's defending the borders? Who's farming the food for everyone else? It's not a construction plan. It's a blueprint for total societal collapse.
And then you have the tools. We are told they used copper chisels. Well, modern experiments have shown that a soft copper chisel is basically useless against hard stone. It gets dull in minutes. To cut and shape 2.3 million blocks would take an estimated 920 million man-hours of work. If one chisel only lasts for 20 minutes, well, the total number of chisels needed comes out to roughly 2.76 billion. That's billion with a B. Where do they get all that copper? Where are the giant mines, the smelting factories? There is absolutely nothing in the archaeological record on that scale. Everywhere you look, the physical reality just completely dwarfs the official explanation.
So the math is impossible, and the logistics are impossible. But the problems don't stop there. Now we have to move from the numbers on a page to the actual physical reality on the ground at Giza. And here, the official story completely breaks down when you look at the tools they supposedly used versus the precision they somehow achieved. And then there's the little problem of all the missing evidence.
This right here says it all. On the one hand, you had the official toolkit, soft metal, wood, rope, and some plumb bobs. And on the other hand, you have the finished product, a structure whose base is perfectly level to within just a couple of centimeters. It's aligned to true north with an accuracy that would make a modern surveyor sweat. The outer casing stones were fit so tightly you couldn't get a razor blade between them. So the question is, how do you get that result with those tools? It's like saying you built a supercar with a hammer and a screwdriver. The tool doesn't match the task.
Now, the typical response you'll get is, oh, but the builders were just incredibly skilled. They had techniques we've lost to time. But here's the thing. Skill has its limits. Skill cannot defy the laws of physics. No matter how skilled a woodworker you are, you can't carve oak with a banana. It's physically impossible. And in the same way, you cannot cut and shape granite with laser-like precision using a soft copper chisel. It's not a question of skill, it's physics.
And if a city of 100,000 men worked on a project for 20 years, they would have left a massive footprint. But the evidence, it's just not there. I mean, where are the giant worker villages needed to house that many people? Where are the tool factories for billions of chisels? Where are the detailed blueprints? For a civilization famous for recording everything, their silence on the biggest building project in human history is, well, it's deafening. It's like the entire project and the massive army that supposedly built it never even existed.
So let's recap. The math is impossible, the physics is impossible, and the archaeological evidence is missing. If the official story can't possibly be true, then what is? This leads us to a radical new idea, an alternative timeline. What if the solution isn't that the ancient Egyptians were magic, but that our entire timeline of history is a modern invention?
This theory suggests that the real story doesn't start 4,500 years ago, but much more recently. It proposes a global cataclysm, maybe as recent as the 1700s, something sometimes called the Great Reset. This event supposedly wiped out a previous, highly advanced global civilization, leaving only its most massive structure standing. Then, in the aftermath, a new history was written. Calendars were changed, and in the 1800s, modern Egyptology was born, and it took these incredible ruins and pushed their origins deep into a fabricated, primitive past.
So in this version of events, the pyramids weren't built by Khufu and his workers. They are inherited structures, relics of a lost world. They were built by a pre-cataclysm global civilization that had technology that may have even surpassed our own. The people we call the ancient Egyptians weren't the builders at all. They were the survivors, living in the ruins of a forgotten golden age, trying to make sense of the incredible world they found themselves in.
And if you start thinking that way, it forces you to ask a really basic question. What were these things even for? We're told they were tombs, but no pharaoh's body was ever actually found in the Great Pyramid. The main chambers were discovered completely empty. So what if they're not tombs at all? What if we're looking at them all wrong? When you look at the perfect mathematical alignments, the shafts that point to stars, the use of granite packed with quartz crystal, you have to wonder, are these just fancy graves, or are we looking at the remains of a lost technology? Ancient power plants maybe? Communication devices? Something we can't even begin to understand?
Once you see the pyramids as recent technology instead of ancient tombs, it opens up a much, much bigger rabbit hole. The problem isn't just one monument in Egypt anymore. It's our entire understanding of the human story. And that leads to the biggest question of all. If any of this is true, why would someone go to such incredible lengths to hide it? Why invent thousands of years of fake history?
Because, you see, the pyramids are not alone. You find the same pattern of impossible engineering all over the world. The massive stone walls in Peru fit together without mortar. The giant temple complexes in Cambodia. The incredible underground cities in Turkey. The official story always says they were built by primitive people with simple tools. But they all show a level of sophistication that just screams of high technology. It's not a bunch of separate mysteries. It's the footprint of a single, lost global civilization.
So why hide it?
Why make up this long, slow, painful story of human progress from cavemen to us? The answer, this theory suggests, is one word: control. If you can convince people that we are the absolute peak of civilization, that things have never been better, then people are much less likely to question the way things are. But if they knew that a previous civilization reached incredible heights, maybe even beyond our own, well, that changes everything. It proves what humanity is truly capable of. A fabricated history keeps our minds small, our ambitions limited. It makes us easier to control.
Look, we started this journey with a simple promise: to follow the numbers and see what they told us. We've seen how basic math around population, logistics, and tools makes the official story look absurd. The numbers don't have an agenda. They don't have a story to sell you. They just point to what's true and what isn't. And in this case, the inconsistencies they point to are so massive, you have to conclude that the official story simply cannot be true.
Think about the path we just took together. We started with the official story they tell everyone. Then we poked holes in it using simple math. We saw the physical evidence that should be there just isn't. And out of the rubble of that old story, we uncovered a new timeline that actually seems to fit the facts. And now, you're not left with a new belief system. You're empowered with the right questions. You've seen the data for yourself.
So where does all this lead us? The conclusion is as shocking as it is unavoidable. The pyramids were not built 4,500 years ago by a Bronze Age culture. They are the indestructible remnants of a recent, highly advanced global civilization that has been erased from our memory. In the true timeline of humanity, they were built yesterday, and their silent stone presence is proof that our entire history is a lie.
And really, that's the only question that matters now. You've seen the numbers, you've seen the logic, you've seen how the official story is a mathematical impossibility. The alternative, as wild as it sounds, actually explains the evidence. So the question is, are you brave enough to accept it? Are you willing to question everything you've ever been taught? Because that's how this awakening begins. Not by believing a new story, but by finally realizing the old one never made sense in the first place. The numbers don't lie. And now, neither can you.